Mitchello Williams and his gang of Misfit Junkrats. Book 1, Quadgun. Prologue. February 24th, 1890. Piccadilly Street, number 6, City of Brass, Skyworld. Mitchello woke up on his rust-colored, three-legged couch, an event that happened often enough. Though his actual bed was no more than 10 paces away, tucked into his bedroom, sometimes he preferred the couch and its hard edges and unforgiving frame. Dawn had yet to break. His only source of light was streaming in through the windows, fake and dull from the 3 gas lamps outside. The fourth, which usually flickered sporadically, must have finally quit and died quietly. He groggily stood, letting the blanket slip to the floor and the chill of the night sting his chest. An old sweater was lying on the floor next to him, and he quickly snatched it up and pulled it over his head. The front was stained and gray, but he didn't care. The bathroom wasn't far. He stumbled past the door to his bedroom, a side table that he regretted ever putting in the hallway, and a mirror hanging silently on the wall. It was dark, and he lived here alone. His bathroom activities completed, Mitchello sleepily turned, intent on returning to sleep, this time in his bed. There was something wrong with his bed, a lump that hadn't been there the night before. Upon closer inspection, it was a girl, a woman. He almost never had visitors here, let alone a girl. That would be dishonorable. It would dishonor his neighbors, his community, and even his town, for Mitchello was the heir to the City of Brass, the oldest son of Lord Blake Williams. And though he didn't live in the Copper Castle, he was still a Williams. Questions raced through his head. First and foremost, where had she come from? He had ventured out a little last night, but at no time did he meet this woman. He would have remembered that face. Without disrespecting the other women of the City of Brass, she was more stunning and less acne-eyed than any of them. A cascade of golden hair graced his unwashed sheets and spilled off the side to the dirty floor. She wore a full blue dress, lace and embroidery included. She must have just shown up last night, picked the lock or something. He didn't move her. She looked so peaceful and warm in the crisp morning air. His first instinct led him to the front door, a solid oak slab covered in sheets of copper, riveted in place on the outside and the inside. Drilled into the metal were 3 locks, a hinge and padlock, a slide bolt he had jimmied off an old stock rifle, and one of those pegs on a chain that grandmas use. All 3 of them were secured, latched, and slid into place. He wasn't paranoid or anything. It's just that when you get a chance to protect your property, you go ahead and do it. The City of Brass didn't welcome odd folk, but they didn't turn any away either. So, he stood there puzzled. There wasn't any sign of forced entry, and he distinctly remembered securing the locks last night. For good measure, and maybe to put his mind at ease, he flipped the rifle bolt back and forth to make sure it was secure. The sound must have woken up his guest, because he heard the ruffle of blankets and the moaning of strained springs against shifting weight. He peered around the doorframe slowly. He didn't want to startle the miss, and from her clothes he could see she was a proper lady, dressed above his social circle, and women like that didn't mess with guys like him. The miss was sitting upright on the side of his bed. Although she had just woken up, she looked so elegant and regal. Her dress was blue, but it was so much more than that. Lace, black as pitch, webbed her torso and spread out wider to her heels. Stark white beads lined the hem of her dress, and she had puffy sleeves the size of cannonballs. She looked like the ocean would, if you could see it at night, You just gonna stare at me, stranger? Or are you gonna offer me something to drink? Her voice was so sweet, melodious, and innocent. Mitchello could have sworn honey was dripping from her mouth. No, miss, he said, forcing his eyes to meet hers. But he realized he had only answered her first question. When she smiled, he was too stunned to answer the second. He had never seen this woman before in his life. He would have remembered. How did you get in here? I've checked and rechecked the locks on my door, and I clearly remembered locking them last night. Window, she said plainly, as if it was a simple task to climb 3 floors up the shantytown exterior of his home and open a window that had been locked since last October. Window, Mitchello said, still trying to take it all in. Is there an echo in here? The window was also locked, he managed. Didn't stop me. She reached into the folds of her dress and produced a long, flat piece of steel, 2 feet long, and ending in a hook. You really should invest in hinge locks. His eyes were pulled from her face to the steel lockpick. Steel. It was no mere chunk of iron. The lockpick had been alchemically combined with chromium to make it sturdy but flexible, and shiny, and resistant to rust. No one in the city of Brass was capable of making anything like it. Steel was expensive, and no one was rich enough to work it. This object alone could pay 2 months' rent. Like what you see? Do you know how much that thing's worth? Dunno, she answered. I didn't pay for it. To me, it's worth a good night's sleep. What's it worth to you? Perhaps we can make a deal. She let the words hang in the air. When he didn't respond, she sighed. It's just a scrap of steel if you don't know how to use it. They taught me about locks back home. Which is where exactly? Somewhere else. I gathered that, Mitchello said. Her face displayed nothing, not even the hint of a secret. Are you from Pandus 1? The Sustenlands? Wheelhouse Valley? Or the outlying railports? A sly smile tipped the edge of her lips. What a fun little game we have here. I bet you can figure it out. Take what you know from me and think. Think? Yes, she said. Think. People in the city of Brass do that sometimes, I hope. Mitchello stayed silent. It's not a fun game unless you participate. I don't know anything about you, he said. Yes, you do, she insisted back. I'll start you off on the right track. Take a look at my dress. He sighed. Fine silks, lace, and ivory beads. None of those materials are produced nearby. So what? Anything can be imported if there's enough gold involved. Not what my dress is made of, Cloudhead. Consider the fact that I'm wearing a dress, a formal, expensive dress. I broke into your house and climbed beneath your covers so I wouldn't freeze last night. Yes, I left unprepared, and yes, I had to make sacrifices to stay warm. I was in a bit of a hurry, so excuse me for not packing my thermals. It all seemed to snap together in his head. The dress had been imported by a wealthy community. There was the short distance she'd be able to make it without warm clothes. And then there was the lockpick, fine steel crafted in a laboratory. There was a city that fit that exact description just to the west of the city of Brass. You came from Lantec? While the city of Brass specialized in the production of copper and steam-powered machines, Lantec focused on iron, a much more universal metal, and sold its inventions at high cost. They were better off than his people and could afford to ship in coal to power their machines, even though the war between the Pandai quadrupled the price to get it by train. Coal was a rare commodity in his city. Even when the coal train shipped, they'd have to travel through Lantec first, and those uptight weasels would buy it all and leave them to scrape the dregs from the bottom of the train cars. Needless to say, City of Brass and Lantec did not get along. She straightened. Yes, Lantec. I knew I wouldn't get far without fire or shelter. The City of Brass was my only option. Don't get me wrong, miss, he said, fuming. I know we're supposed to be grateful to your lord for his protection, but saying your allegiance lies with Carlos de Sanders won't get you far around here. The man's vile and greedy. His taxes on the City of Brass are going to starve us all. He is a scoundrel, I'll give you that, she said. Remember, I'm running away from Lantec, from Carlos de Sanders himself. I'm Jenny Timbers. He let out a breath. At last, they were getting somewhere. I'm Mitchello Williams. It's a pleasure, Mr. Williams. Indeed, Miss Timbers. Something about her face drooped, like she was remembering a task she'd forgotten to do. It's Mrs. Timbers, actually. And then there were hooves. A single horse at first, but the muffled clumps of multiple steeds could be heard through the closed window. At this hour, there was no reason for a group of riders to be stampeding down Main Street. Yet there was a look on Jenny's face that told me those horses were like the coming of death itself. A single gunshot split the pre-dawn air, and the sound was deep, not like your typical pea-shooting pistol. It was more like the deafening boom of a long-barreled rifle discharging a fat bullet. Mitchello moved to the window, stopping just before he disturbed the curtains, and peered through the gap. Down the street, he saw 3 shapes moving. The first was a lone man riding a massive horse. His parka flapped in the wind, his hat was rounded and short-brimmed, and a rifle sat on his hip, barrel pointed to the sky, smoke leaking out of the end like a ghost from a grave. His horse reared, exposing an armored belly, plates of interlocking brass clanking as they stretched. He halted, and the stallion stamped its hooves impatiently. The second was large and bulky. Multiple horses bridled together pulled a dark carriage. Their breath streamed out of their mouths, a stark contrast to their black bodies. The carriage was 6-wheeled, 2 axles in the back and 1 up front, and each wheel shined white in the darkness, steel-plated and ornate. The third and final shape was long and skinny. From a distance, it looked like a needle coming to a point towards the front with 2 bright eyes lighting its path. It too was on wheels, but as it approached, he could hear the roar of its coal-heated steam engine and the banging of its spiked wheels digging into the solid, uneven ground. He knew an automobile when he saw one, which was rare enough. Owning any 4-wheeled vehicle that wasn't bound to train rails was a sign of massive wealth, and this one was especially sinister, armored and polished to a shine. It came to a halt behind the carriage, and its lights extinguished. There was a silence, aside from the occasional whinny of one of the horses, and it seemed to stretch on too long. Mitchello reached around the curtain and unlatched the window, cracking it slightly to hear better. There was a click, and the door to the automobile swung open. At the same time, the mounted man reined his horse, galloped close to the side of the automobile, and lit a torch with his free hand. Out of the open door stepped a man wearing a curved brim hat, dark blue and studded with gems on its edge. Diamonds? From the shadows of the Copper Castle, which stood looming over the city at the end of Main Street, the strong voice of his father, Lord Blake, rang out. Lord de Sanders, you've come at a most inconvenient time. You've woken up my town and torn up my street. To what do I owe this visit? De Sanders' voice was equally deep, a trait that seemed to be required of a lord in this wild country. If you don't know, perhaps your grip on this town is too loose, Lord Williams. You can't trust these people, these beggars. That's why they come to your City of Brass. Venom dripped from his lips with every word. Saddle those words, De Sanders, said Lord Blake. I have my best marksman with a hemstock rifle trained on your head. Say anything else about my people, and the only thing you'll be worried about is your personal lock on the pearly gates. get back in your machine and go back to Lantec before you make a fatal move." Dessander's laugh was low and slow. He nodded to the rider, who gave up the torch. Then the rider fixed his rifle on Lord Blake, who now stood in the Copper Castle Plaza. "Lord Blake Williams. That's a strong name. And you've proven time and time again that it comes with a strong backbone. I know we haven't gotten along these past 20 years. I mean, who could forget our incident last May with your poachers and my cattle?" "Last May happened differently in my memory, Dissanders," answered Lord Blake. "I believe I lost someone very close to me, while you only lost a few cows." "Yes," said Dissanders with a smirk. "We all have to sacrifice to get what we want, don't we? Which is why I'm willing to make a wager with you. Are you a betting man, Lord Blake Williams?" He wasn't, Mitchello knew. "I only bet on a sure thing," was the answer. "Now, what's the fun in that?" asked Dissanders. "Fine, I'll give you a sure bet. My best marksman, Camilo, has a rifle so superior to your pitiful hemstock that even if your man fires, Camilo will shoot you in the head so precisely that you'll die before I do. You want to take me up on that bet?" Lord Blake withdrew his gunman. "Come inside, Dissanders, so we can discuss why you're here in private." Carlos Dissanders, the Lord of Lantec, thought about that for a moment. His shooter still aimed down the barrel of his rifle. "No, I don't think so, because what I have to say concerns your entire city. I want everyone to listen closely. You have a treasure of mine. It left Lantec last night, and my sources say it's somewhere here. What a man owns, I believe is the saying, and my property has been stolen from me. By right, I can melt this city to the ground as I search for my treasure. But I'm feeling generous this morning. I will give you 3 days to return my treasure to me. By dawn of the 4th day, if it is not safely back in my possession, I will come. I will come with my machines, and my rifles, and my shotguns. I will come with my tanks, my airships, and my war horses. I will come with fire and lightning, and I will find my treasure." His voice resounded in the blackness beyond. With a nod from his lord, Camilo hopped off the horses and approached the carriage. "Camilo here is untying the horses on my little gift to you, Lord Blake Williams. But follow my instructions carefully. Inside is a reward when my treasure is returned. I know your honor wouldn't permit you to steal from me, so I will pay you to find the man who did. Do not attempt to open the carriage until after you've delivered what I own. You'll find this to be a satisfactory exchange if you are patient, and if you are not, and try to open your present early, it will be destroyed." Camilo finished untying the horses and mounted again. His lord turned away and walked to the door of his automobile. "Dawn of the 4th day, Lord Blake Williams." Within a minute, both the automobile and the pack of horses were nothing but specks on the horizon, and the only thing that remained was the dark carriage, resting in place in the middle of Main Street.